Hey guys, how you doing today? So I learned just yesterday that on June 30th, a young woman by the name of Jessica Reznicek, I apologize if that pronunciation is incorrect. I've only ever read the last name. Jessica Reznicek was sentenced to 8 years in prison, a $3 million fine, and then 3 years probation on top of that, for damaging the Dakota Access Pipeline. Jessica is what's known as a water warrior. She is fighting to try to stop the machinery of this hellish climate change disaster that we are all facing. And for her efforts, for fighting against the capitalist death cult that is plunging us into the nightmare scenario, she is going to serve 8 years in prison. She has been declared a domestic terrorist by the FBI. And juxtapose this to what's going on to the January 6th insurrectionists, and you can see exactly where the priorities of the capitalist death cult lie. That someone like Jessica, whose crime is attempting to save the human species from the capitalist death cult, while the death cult protects the machinery and the infrastructure in order to plunge us further and further into our destruction. This story perfectly articulates the battle lines that have been drawn. If you're sitting there believing for even a moment that Jessica is in the wrong here, well, the very people who built the pipeline, who maintain the pipeline, have already admitted and are very, very aware that their actions are going to lead to major civilization level disruptions. They have been aware of this since the 1970s. ExxonMobil famously has received documentation. We have received the paperwork of their admission that what they are doing is destructive. They know that they are evil. They're very aware that they are the empire, that they are the Darth Vader in the story, and they simply don't care. And to make this aspect of the story even more grotesque, the day that Jessica was sentenced to 8 years in prison for protecting us from the capitalist death cult, the day that she was sentenced was the same day that documents leaked from ExxonMobil saying that they were only putting a public face on trying to prevent the climate change disaster, and but in private, they're still very much hell-bent on destroying us all to climate change, and they're not going to do anything about it. If you're one of the people who bounce out of these videos around now, please be sure to like, please be sure to share, please be sure to subscribe. Those are the free things you can do. If you have $1 jangling around in your pocket, think about donating to my Patreon. We need to be supporting leftist voices. I need to pay my rent, right? That's capitalism for you, baby. I'd gladly do this for free, but unfortunately that's not how it works. I have a live stream, 6 to 9 p.m. every weekday. Please come. I am attempting to galvanize and organize people into a revolution. That is the project of this channel. We have to do something, and we have to throw our support behind the heroes of this resistance, like Jessica. Jessica has made the ultimate sacrifice. She has sacrificed 8 years of her life, not to mention the fact that she is going to be labeled as a domestic terrorist from this day forward, not to mention the $3 million that they are throwing at her, so that they are plunging her entire life into a permanent debt peonage because she had the audacity to pick up an acetylene torch and actually attempt to do something in the face of this overwhelming climate change catastrophe. If you are sitting there still pretending as though this isn't anything but a full-scale catastrophe, please be aware that heat wave that happened throughout the West Coast, right? Well, now there are stories coming out that that heat wave was burning crops on the vine, right? That there are cherry crops that were literally burned to being unusable because of that heat wave. Is there anything more terrifying than heat wave destroys food supply? And yet we're continuing to plunge ourselves forward with no sign of stopping, with no sign of moving forward. And so the question becomes, what is it worth to us? Is it worth living a few more years, a few more decades in this delusional space that maybe capitalism will actually save us, as it actively incarcerates people, as it actively works to label people who attempt to fight back domestic terrorists, as Joe Biden starts to call socialists and communists domestic terrorists, as he begins to call anti-capitalists domestic terrorists? How much longer until simply publishing a video like this is going to be an offense that gets someone rounded up and arrested for a period of time? How much longer is it going to be until the simple act of speaking out against the capitalist death cult is itself going to be a criminal offense? The truth of this story is that they are using Jessica as a warning to the rest of the world, that if you stand in the way of the demands and the insanity of the capitalist death cult, if you dare defend yourself, which is exactly what Jessica has done, she has defended herself against the overwhelming psychotic nature of the capitalist death cult. If you attempt to defend yourself, we will incarcerate you for a decade at the beginning, at the behest. As this crisis unfolds, as it becomes more and more obvious that our inability to actually simply stop, our inability to confront capital, our inability to confront these psychopaths and sociopaths who are gladly trading our civilization, if not our species, for wealth, for money in an offshore account somewhere. Once it becomes more and more obvious that the legacy of white culture is death, once it becomes more and more obvious, more and more people like Jessica will appear. More and more people will take to these pipelines. More and more people will take to the fossil fuel industry. And my fear is that it will be far too late. My fear is that as we are that the final phase of all of this will not be about dismantling a system in order to create a new sustainable system, but instead it will simply be the desperate acts of vengeance coming from the victims of a system that abandoned them years and years ago. These are the dark days ahead. We are heading into a period of true darkness, where the people who are fighting back against the climate change disasters are the people who are going to go to jail, and the people who are perpetuating these climate change disasters, the criminals, the psychopaths, they are the ones who are going to rule this place. These are dark days ahead. Under these circumstances, you guys are doing very, very well. You're making good decisions for yourselves. You're making good decisions for the people around you. You live in a society that spends hundreds of billions of dollars to gaslight you into believing that you are less than what you are, to diminish you, to insult you, to ignore you. The culture spends hundreds of billions of dollars doing that instead of a single penny to keep you off the streets. Instead of attempting to protect you from these climate change disasters, instead of declaring these climate change disasters a national security risk, they are going to say that the people fighting back are the national security risk. You live in a society that has, if it has morals, if it cares about its moral positioning, it has inverted the morality system. They clutch hold of a book called the Bible that they don't read, whose hero would be the one coming at them whip in hand. And yet they still believe that when this rapture occurs, that they will be the winners of this rapture. This is how deluded and embarrassing our society has become. This is how deluded and embarrassing it is to live as a Westerner in a capitalist society. We literally are doing everything we can to destroy ourselves and punish those who dare stand up and say, maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should simply stop. Maybe we should simply stop. 8 years in jail for taking a torch to a pipeline. Just remember, guys, please like, please share, please subscribe, hit my Patreon, Livestream 6 to 9, all of that kind of stuff. But remember more than anything, right? You are a divine being, standing on divine energy, and we could use some of it right now. Good luck. We're gonna need it.